joining us today. And again, my name is Kimberly Smith, and I am so thrilled to have all of you here. And today we are going to explore one of the most rapidly evolving areas in financial compliance, and that's these digital assets, DAOs, and the future of AML regulations in a decentralized world. And this is kind of the ground shifting beneath our feet now. And I think it's going to shift even faster in these coming year or two. We are very lucky to have Kara Hennessy. She's a co-founder of Provenance Compliance. Kara, she knows the regulatory landscape. She is an expert in financial services, compliance, and risk management. And I use the word expert very broadly because, as we all know, no one's really an expert. Kara, I think you can kind of agree with me on that. It's just
100%. Yes,
we are always learning. Yes. So, Kara, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into compliance and when you started Provenance?
Yeah, thank you, Kim. And thank you. It's an absolute honor to be here. I've avidly followed you guys over the years, and I love the format of your webinars. You know, when I was growing up in the compliance industry, just as you said, you sometimes feel alone and sometimes you're missing, you have the laws, the regulations, the guidance, but sometimes you're missing that connect to the practical, operational compliance piece. And I've always found your webinar super, super helpful. So I hope I do you justice. Hi, everyone. So great to see so many here today tuning in for this topic, these broad topics. Frankly, it was a bit intimidating trying to put together a presentation to cover so much in such a short space of time. Anyhow, we will endeavor. I'm Kara Hennessy, co-founder of Provenance. We're a compliance advisory for digital assets. Before Provenance, I worked across audit, risk and compliance, fiduciary services, funds, asset management, TCSPs and banks or banking. And then, a few years ago, 2019, in the Cayman Islands where I was working, I got to see the setup of the first tokenized fund in the Cayman Islands, in and from within the Cayman Islands. And that was a huge learning curve. And in that as well, we regarded that a lot of businesses didn't have within their risk appetite to do business for crypto. So that was kind of the catalyst for us to set up Provenance. And now we work with digital native enterprises such as VASPs, tokenized funds, crypto funds, DAOs, and NFT projects. And we help those digital natives structure their business in compliance with FATF and jurisdictional regulatory regimes. So we help them traverse into the regulatory that they're not familiar with. And then we also work with the DGen institutional kind of type clients. And in that, I would say law firms, asset managers, fund admins from TradFi, who are starting to or planning to engage with clients in digital assets. What we do with those clients is we help them design or uplift their operational control framework to understand and mitigate the risks involved in crypto asset engagement. So yeah, it's been a journey, and like I would say to everybody, take it as a journey. We're here to help and advise and share with you. The biggest thing I think, Kim, about working in the digital asset space is it evolves so rapidly. There's no way you can master everything individually as an individual organization, as an individual expert. You have to pull on facets from different places. And there's a lot more collaboration than there ever has been before. And that, to me, is wonderful. I've always been a strong advocate for public to private and private to private collaboration, but this is a whole other level of that. So yeah.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, it's moving fast. Okay, great. So before we begin, a little bit of housekeeping. So just to remind everybody, this is not legal advice. It should last about 1 hour. There is a certificate of attendance that will be automatically generated for those of you who are attending the live broadcast. We will send out the recording as well. I think it takes a few days by the time we do some editing. You can post your questions, and I can see that there are some questions in the question box. Tom will, at some point, we'll kind of break and take some questions too. Recordings and slides will be available to all registrants. And also, just so, because I know sometimes people have to kind of leave early, so we do have some upcoming Gray Matters topics. One I do want to announce and bring your attention to, because we kind of fitted it in a rush, and that is on Tuesday. For those of you who are in Cayman, we have walkers joining us. They are going to be going over the recent Proceeds of Crime Act revisions and how that's going to change the SAR, the Suspicious Activity Reporting process, which is very important. Excuse me. So do join us on Tuesday again. We just put that on the calendar yesterday, so we will rush that registration link out for those of you who need that. They're going to have a funds attorney on it as well. So any of you who are working with funds, directors of funds, this is important information you need to have. And then, of course, we've got the country risk rating, FATCA and CRS topics, and AML reports coming up. And one thing that we're also about to announce too is AML awareness training. I'll be hosting that. It's going to be a fun one. I call it Zen and the Art of AML Compliance. I figured we all need a little bit of Zen these days, given all the stresses everybody's under. So that is a training program if you are looking for AML awareness training. It will not be jurisdiction specific though. I do refer people to your local consultants for that. We will start too with a poll. Tom, if you can launch the poll, how familiar are you with virtual assets? And while you guys are responding to that, I did have this, I noticed it was January 23rd, obviously here in the US. I am based in the US. And obviously Trump issued a few dozen executive orders, I believe. But one was on, I don't know if it was an executive order, but they made a statement about the digital financial technology. Basically, they're going to work really hard. Cara, do you have any knowledge of what the U.S. is doing or wanting to do? It's my understanding they want to kind of make the U.S. very digital asset friendly. Is that correct?
Absolutely, and we will touch on that. There's a number of things that have happened recently in the US that have made strong and very clear declaration of their attitude towards crypto going forward and under the current administration. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was even doing some research earlier too about Wyoming. I did not realize Wyoming was so
Oh,
pro.
Wyoming, massive,
Wow.
yeah, yeah. And there's actually a lot of DAOs that are structured through Wyoming as well. Under it's a
Yeah.
structure that's kind of hybrid between a trust and a nonprofit.
Yeah.
Um, I might say, Kim, it's very interesting to see. Do you have? I pulled up Andy Carpenter from OGA did a presentation on VASPs in July 2023.
Hmm.
Um, he asked this exact same question, and it's so interesting to see the movement on the
Exactly, yeah. And I actually, the next slide shows the responses to this exact same question. So what Kara's referring to, for those who are new, we did a webinar July of 2023, so a year and a half ago. We asked this very question. So we can go ahead and close the poll, Tom. And if you want to go ahead and show the results of that from today, and then I will show the results from the last, here we go. Yep. So we now have what the responses here are. Here, I think I have to close the polls. I'm going to close the poll, Tom. Okay, yeah, you close it. Are you able to share those responses? Just so those of you who know, you said very knowledgeable. Only 5% of you said you were very knowledgeable with virtual assets. 42% said moderately knowledgeable. 43 said not very knowledgeable, and 10% said not at all knowledgeable. Now that's interesting. I thought there would be a bit more, because that's pretty much
It's
in
quite
line with
it's quite parallel.
this.
Yeah, it's the same, right? It's on the kind of the extreme spectrums.
Mhm.
It was 2%. It's now 5%. And then 10% not at all, same as last year, right? Or
Mhm.
2%
Yeah.
was 2023. Yeah, that's surprising. Thought I might move
Well,
on.
I wonder if it's because it's such a hard topic to kind of wrap your head around if you're not just one of these true advocates, these somebody who's very into it. I think if we ask this same question 6 months from now, it's going to be different. I think people are going to get a bit more knowledgeable and a bit more aware of it. Um, so yeah, so I think like I'll keep asking this question every 6 months or so to see how it's changing in our audience. So yeah. So our next, we do have one more poll question, and it has anybody here ever performed due diligence on a DAO or tokenized fund? And Kara, you said that you had to do your first tokenized fund and came in 2019. So you've got some experience there. Okay, I've got a couple of hands raising. Tom, there should be a poll question for this. Can you launch that poll question for that so we can get a there we go. Yeah. So yeah, have you ever performed due diligence on a DAO or tokenized fund? So we'll give everybody a chance there. So Kara, while they're answering that, do you have any kind of stories or anything you would want to share about that learning experience back in 2019?
Yeah, it's a steep learning curve. That was
Mhm.
the lesson. Yeah, well, one thing I would say that it was fantastic to see that opportunity arise in the Cayman Islands. And again, I think the offshore jurisdictions have done a remarkable job of being, forerunners in the field for digital assets. And I think, the onboarding of a DAO and a tokenized fund, honestly, is very straightforward. The onboarding, if you are if you're a corporate service provider or whatnot, you're onboarding very standard, and I'll touch on that later on. It's more of the if you're in when I was working with First Tokenized Fund, I was working at a fund administrator, so it's that element of all of the operational components that going into servicing a tokenized fund. That's where the learning is, and that's where people should be kind of, if you are in the fund admin space, future scoping what that looks like, what that ecosystem of operating a tokenized fund looks like. But yeah,
Okay.
it's not surprising that not many people have experience. It's still very nascent.
Okay. All right. Tom, if you can end that and share the results. So I'm showing 5% have on a DAO, 5% have on a tokenized fund, 1% on both, and 88% have said no. And again, I think that 88% number is going to drop here in a year or so, um, as we're going to kind of learn today. All right, so thank you very much for, you can close that poll, Tom, and we will go ahead and Kara, yeah, so yeah, go ahead and I'll let you kind of get started, and I'll keep an eye on questions, Tom and I will, and we will post some questions too. So do feel free, everyone, to ask, put your questions in the question box as you have them. So welcome,
Thank
Kara.
you, Kim, and thank you, Tom. Hey, folks, there's a lot to cover today, and like I would say, even since yesterday, much will have changed. In preparing the slides, my aim was to provide information that's useful to those of you who are working in TradFi. And I can see from the results that a lot of you will not have engaged yet with digital assets in terms of vast or tokenized funds. And perhaps that is because your organizations, do not have risk appetite at this point in time for doing business. Therefore, you would not come into contact with. However, as I say to people in the industry in compliance, even if your business chooses not to do business, not to, let's say, accept crypto or not to engage with clients who interact with crypto, it will still inevitably change the marketplace in which we operate. And we should be even cognizant of how it's going to affect our competitiveness, our market participation, our roles in the market if we do not participate with VASPs or with tokenized funds. So I'm just going to go through a couple of the main concepts that you might expect to be confronted with in the coming year. And today, again, I want to reiterate, I'm looking at this through the lens of compliance professional. I'm not going deeper into the technology. And then obviously we can't touch upon the change. We can't touch upon digital assets without talking about the current change in the US right now, from the crypto task force, which is run by Hester Pierce, the godmother of crypto. And then there was an executive order emphasizing protecting the rights of individuals to access and engage with blockchain networks, including mining, validation, and self-custody of digital assets. So it's been a very, very, definite view out of the US. And then in the EU as well, we've seen the evolution of MiCAR in this year, and we're seeing that even from today. Crypto.com announced that they are now fully accessing all of the EEA member states, all of the European member states. They have an authorization, a CASP authorization through Malta, but that then gives them access to all of Europe. And I would like to say, apologies, I see which is great actually, because we're limited on time here. I see the poll is going ahead, even though, yeah, that's brilliant. You guys can go ahead and answer.
Yeah.
I'll say to anybody at the start of your journey, it's not necessary or indeed possible to understand everything from Satoshi's white paper to meme coins. the core tenets of what you do in compliance for regulated financial services, it remains the same, right? We've got corporate governance frameworks, we've got P&Ps, we've got KYC onboarding, ongoing monitoring, source of funds, risk ratings. We've got all of those. What's different with blockchain is the technology underpinning that is different. But ultimately, you in compliance are presiding over the same level of risks. There is now less, I would say, regulatory uncertainty, more regulatory iterations. And in the Cayman Islands, as an example, I will refer often to the Cayman Islands, as that's where my deep experience is. In the Cayman Islands, we have quite a mature framework, and we are moving into the licensing regime hopefully in 2025. A couple of key things I would love you to remember when it comes to digital asset, virtual assets. It's important to separate the value of blockchain technology from the price of Bitcoin, which is hype. When Bernie Madoff and this is for all the AML and financial crime investigators out there, when Bernie Madoff made off with billions, we didn't say let's ban cash or fiat, that it's inherently bad. Crypto in itself is not the cause of the crime. It's a means, one of many, which criminals can launder with. It in of itself is not bad. And if you take, for example, Swift messaging, how many of us know the actual technical, imprint of how Swift works? We don't, but we trust it and we rely upon it, and it operates under the system that we preside over. Anyhow, today we will cruise through high level in order of regulatory clarity. What is a digital/virtual asset? What is a tokenized fund? Crypto and banking, DAOs, and then Q&A. So sorry, Tom, do we have the answers to do you or have you ever traded crypto?
And
Yes, I
sorry,
will share them now.
yeah, and just so you know, like we talked earlier, like I have a Cash App account and I can buy crypto and then sell it again. Is that trading crypto in your mind?
Yes.
I don't have a
And
wallet and all that type of good stuff.
yes, so like on my phone, on my Revolut account, I can buy, crypto, and that's exactly where the crypto, the mainstreaming needs to get to, where you're interacting with blockchain without even knowing it.
Hmm.
Because again, back to the Swift, we're interacting and we don't know, we don't understand the technical, because to date it's been quite alienating. And I
Hmm.
think with crypto, there's a lot, it's not so much regulatory uncertainty. Again, I say regulatory uncertainty, that is the barrier now. It's more of a cognitive dissonance effect. And what I mean by that is, like, some people believe in the revolutionary potential of blockchain, but then they also worry about the risks like volatility or regulation. So they stay away, right? They believe in it, but they're like, nah, I kind of don't want to go there. Or investors might be experiencing doubt if the prices crash, even though they strongly believe in crypto. So, and then you have critics who dismiss crypto as worthless, but then they still acknowledge the growing adoption. So it's like the seesaw of, like, I get it, I see it's the future, but I don't want to go there. I don't understand. And a big barrier to that is the end user experience or the end user intimidation of engaging with crypto. But exactly, Kim, you operating through your phone is where it needs to get to. And you operating through your phone and accessing crypto in and through a gateway that you understand and that you trust ultimately.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, and so here we see from the results, 74% have not, and 26% have engaged with crypto, and
And could
that's
that be
interesting.
because most of our audience are in kind of, offshore in the smaller jurisdictions? Could that be
Well,
the reason why?
yeah, if you look at the mainstream adoption of crypto, like for example, the country with the highest adoption rate is Nigeria. They have, like, I think 90 million, or
Mhm.
45% of their population own crypto. And the reason there is because they don't trust, generally, okay, I'm generalizing here, but generally don't trust their government, don't trust their banks. They have a need to exchange value. Therefore, crypto is a means of exchange of value that is accessible, and they may be living remotely. They may only have their phone. They may not have, access to banking. So this is their access point. So that's why
Yeah.
it's so popular. In the Western world, we don't have that same urgency. We have EFTs, we have electronic banking, we trust our governments, we trust our banks. Therefore, our adoption is slower. Our adoption, we're nervous to move without our trusted regulators and our trusted banks giving us the okay and saying this is the way and this is the guidance. But now we are moving into that space. We are moving into that regulatory assurity, and now that's when we'll see this, this side. And yes, the offshore jurisdictions. Of course, again, there are certain things on the retail level that it's harder to access. in certain jurisdictions. But yeah, great
Okay,
question.
that's great. All right. You can close that poll, Tom, and then we'll move on to the next slide. All right.
Okay, so the next slide is what are digital or virtual assets? There's lots of terminology that is pretty much used interchangeably. You've digital assets, virtual assets, cryptocurrencies, virtual currencies. They're more or less the same, to be honest with you. They're items of value that only exist digitally. So digital assets could be, it could even be, MP3 file or content or coding, cryptocurrencies, obviously. And you might be surprised to know there's like 20,000 cryptocurrencies, around that number. Many of them are a word I can't say on this webinar, coins. And then it's important to know that the top 20 cryptocurrencies make up 90% of the total market value. So that's, your Bitcoin, your ETH, USDT, stablecoins, USDC, XRP, Cardano, all of those ones that are kind of well known, and you can find those lists anywhere. But that's interesting. 90% of the value is held by 20 of the cryptocurrencies. Then you have NFTs. NFT is a non-fungible token. It's unique digital representation of something like art. If you want to know any more about NFTs, I would highly recommend a documentary on Netflix called NFT WTF. And that goes through a very interesting project by the artist Damien Hirst, who created 10,000 original NFTs and then original art pieces. They were dots. And at the end, it was a project where people held the digital NFT for so long, and then at the end, they could either burn the digital token or the digital NFT and take the real copy of the art, or keep it. And I'll let you watch the show to see
Sounds
which
interesting.
came out. Yeah, it's really interesting. Really interesting to see how people value it. And then virtual assets is like a subset of digital assets. And what's important for us in the compliance space is virtual assets is really the terminology that's recognized by FATF and principally associated with financial transactions. So you've got your cryptocurrencies, your stable coins, your tokenized assets, and all virtual assets are digital assets, but not all digital assets are virtual assets. So that's your MP files and stuff like that. And then use case is important. Use cases, there are a plethora. I think most people are most familiar with use case being hodling, being holding Bitcoin, being used as an investment type. In other parts of the world, in Africa, it's not. It's like an everyday use. It's currency for daily lives. And then for a lot of people, you have the attractiveness of the crypto and the stable coins in particular is to peg it to the USD and to peg it to something concrete. Like, for example, we know that TradFi banks have been used for nesting accounts. Let's say in Argentina, where there's currency instability, you want to get into a USD account. There are cases where a company, let's say in Argentina, will set up a bank account that is a USD bank account, and they will take funds, let's say in their local village. People will come to me. Let's say I set up a company, Hennessy and Company, in a traditional US bank. I will take the people in my village's money to get them into a USD. So I'm nesting in that account. Now, having access to crypto and stablecoin, I can directly access that stablecoin. I can directly hedge. I can directly, have access to a stable currency.
Okay.
They're the
Question.
main. Yep.
Stable coins versus cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin. What's the difference?
Stablecoin is pegged to something is collateralized to real world asset,
Okay,
to
so
the
it's
US dollar,
pegged
to
to a
gold.
fiat
Yeah,
currency. Okay,
yeah.
great. And for those who don't know, HODL, it stands for hold on for dear life because it's
Oh
so
yeah.
volatile.
Hold. Yeah. I
It's,
didn't
it's
misspell it, how they use it. Um, so if we could go to the next slide, please, Tom. Okay. Thank you. So this is just, I'm not going to go through every, you can read yourselves here. There's significant global momentum in the crypto space, digital asset space. It's mainstreaming. We have evolved regulatory frameworks. And what we're now dealing with actually is jurisdictional arbitrage. We're seeing a lot of countries vying to attract digital asset business to their shores. Unlike a TradFi bank, once you're established and authorized in the appropriate jurisdictions, your reach is global, right? And your scale is infinite. So we're at the point where we're finally breaking through the hype cycle. We have clearer regulation. Once you're set up, like crypto.com, when they're set up and they can access all of Europe from their one location, their one authorized location, that is a hugely significant market. And then there are many quantitative stats that evidence the global mainstreaming, like the market capitalization is 3.9 trillion. One of the most fascinating I found is that stablecoin transactions, 26.7 trillion. That overtook MasterCard and Visa in transaction value in 2024. Like that shocked me. I was like, is that
That is
real?
shocking.
Isn't that crazy? And then, so yeah, and then you have your BTC value, and obviously we've seen the BTC cycle, that's Bitcoin, up and up and up, and creating a massive amount of hype. Tokenized assets, it's a very real balance sheet item, 119 billion, and then 52 million people in the US hold crypto,
Okay.
which I'm sure the current administration will be happy about.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Um, and then difference from traditional assets. Again, I'm going to look at this from the lens of regulated TradFi and compliance, not from the perspective of DeFi diehards, because DeFi is another, in one sense, the regulated sphere is contra to what some of the original objectives of blockchain crypto have been, but it's what is required. As I went go back to the same point of the trust for mainstream in the Western world is what we're moving towards. So I'm looking at this. What are the differences from, if you're sitting in a compliance seat, okay, and if you're sitting in compliance seat in TradFi, what should I be looking at that's different? And I've put them under good, bad, and then operational challenges. So what's good and what's great about blockchain and crypto and blockchain is that every transaction is permanently embedded in the blockchain ecosystem. So there's no reverse engineering. There's no creative accounting. There's no like, let me put this in and then, oh, let me go back and actually delete that or remove it or reverse it. It's always going to be there. And I'm not sure, but so it becomes really interesting. We saw with another great actually documentary on Netflix is about the Bitfinex Ari Redboard from TRM Labs, is involved in this documentary, and you saw Bitfinex who were scammed all this crypto for years, and then they started using it for, I think it was for travel vouchers or something like this, years into it. And then as soon as it starts moving, you can trace it. We've had clients who've had millions of dollars hacked from their wallet, and the great thing about it is you can trace that. You can trace it from where it started to where it goes, and hopefully then you seize it when it comes off ramp. And off ramp means where you exchange it into cash fiat. So immutable, it's incredible. It's unparalleled in that regard. Auditable, transparent, open to the public in the context of knowing your client and observing their transaction activities. And I would say, Kim, in the world of source of funds of verification, it gives you superpowers. Um, when you're operating in a regulated business like a VASP, there's no such thing as anonymity, right? So if you have a DeFi wallet, there's anonymity. You don't have to provide your KYC. But if you're coming into a VASP or a regulated crypto fund, you have to do your KYC. So I've got your KYC. I verify that you own the wallet, and then I can see what you're doing on chain. So it's almost like you've given me your credit card statement. I can see every transaction that you've done. And that is phenomenally powerful in the world of source of funds. Like if you send me 100,000 from your bank account in, Bank of America, all I can see is 100,000 from Kim in US, and I don't know where you got that from. Democratization. This is another core objective of early days crypto, is accessing, opening up the wider ecosystem of financial services and broadening the opportunity for investment. And this is where those who are unbanked, and there are millions and millions of people who don't have bank accounts, gain access to the financial system. And this is hugely powerful, hugely impactful for all elements. Excuse me. And as well, aside from democratization, it's the if in the asset management world, it creates a whole new market, right? Is in, you're not just dealing with the accredited high net worth investors, but you can create, and there's plenty of people who maybe don't have accumulated wealth, but they have a very clear idea of what they would like to invest in. This opens those gates to those people. And forensic analysis, again, I think I've kind of gone through that. With the on-chain analytics, it's really quite remarkable. What I liken it to is, and I've always, wanted when I was, working in TradFi compliance. I would love if we could do a lot more sharing between private to private. If somebody comes to me, right, and I'm like, this is suspicious activity, we file a SAR, I decline the business or whatnot, they're probably going to go and knock on somebody else's door and try and get in there. Obviously there's, data privacy and all these things, but it would be so much more impactful if we could share information private to private to close ranks against certain illicit activity. With blockchain analytics, that's pretty much what happens, because you tag online, a sanctioned wallet, you tag online dark web, or other risk categories, and I can see, you can see, the next person can see, we can all see the bad actors. So it creates this transparent field of understanding. Borderless and less friction. I think this is both a good and bad point. On the good side of things, if I'm sitting in Cayman, I can, or actually I won't use Cayman. If I'm sitting in Ireland, I can open a bank account, or sorry, a crypto account with a South African VASP in minutes. Literally, it's instantaneous. And a departure from establishing, transactions are instantaneous. But I'll talk about how that can be negative from a compliance point of view as well. Bad pseudonymity in DeFi. So for those of us in the regulated space, when there's DeFi involved, there's still a level of anonymity in self-custody wallets, and that can become an issue. But again, I would iterate that when you're in the regulated space, anonymity is not permissible. You're not coming in. KYC is done on every holder of a wallet. On the bad side, I would say you do not technically require, and this is one of the core objectives of blockchain, is decentralization. But for us who are in the financial services world, it's hard to work with, where there isn't centralized control. There's a whole ethos and objective of DeFi, autonomous, self-regulated, zero-proof concepts. But for mainstream users, it again goes back a bit to the cognitive dissonance. We want to trust, but we're used to the institutional style. And again, where that becomes a problem is if somebody in the DeFi space is hacked or whatever, there's not the same channels of, freeze that account or hold that account, or, where do I complain, and this kind of thing. And then, of course, crypto can be used for bad, for market abuse, for money laundering, terrorist financing, proliferation financing. It's an attractive medium, of course it is, to perpetrate crimes, pig butchering, pump and dump, rug pull. We see it, but that is not exclusive to crypto. And then borderless and less friction. Again, the less friction with the friction, that gives you blockages along the way to make sure you've got everything in line. But I actually read an interesting statistic the other day that 72% of financial crime is committed post KYC, not pre KYC. So that is interesting in of itself. And
what was that number again? 72% of financial crimes have been committed post KYC?
Yeah. And then operational challenges, I would say, if you're, in the business and you're starting, again, I'll use the point of a tokenized fund or working in fund administration, atomic settlement. I quickly realized, working in blockchain and crypto, it's 24/7. Like Christmas Day, you can be, busy looking at things because it's 24/7. It doesn't close down. That is a corporate challenge to have to deal with. And again, it's, if we're offshore regulated financial services, we're used to high ticket value items, lower volume for hedge and mutual funds. In the digital asset space, it's generally high volume, low value. So our frameworks of collecting certified documents and emailing, that's not going to work. How do you do KYC when it's a transaction that's $500 worth? So it's a different mindset, a different application of different KYC. It absolutely can be done, but it requires a redesign of perhaps of what you do. And then hacks and scams, again, that is obviously a very very high kind of, and it has to be taken into account in your risk assessments. And then skills and experience. It takes a hybrid approach because there are amazing technologies out there, TRM labs, Chainalysis, Elliptic, that you can put in place, but they're all quite technical. So you need to have them in like same with AI. AI is phenomenal, but you cannot have AI be responsible for the output. There's EKYC is brilliant, but you cannot have that responsible for the output. You need a hybrid approach. So you need compliance expertise married with the technology to give the results that our stakeholders can understand. You need to be able to report to the board of directors, to the asset managers, to the regulator. You need to communicate the risk that, assessments that you've done in a language the regulator understands. So yeah.
Yeah, let
Um,
the regulator and the board too, because
and the board,
sometimes
absolutely.
board members are not, this is all new to us, and we've got to be able. You have to be able to put it in some kind of wording or in a way that they understand and can comprehend, and that is a skill right
Yeah,
there.
yeah, and yeah, that's it. And it's iterative in the digital asset space. Um, so yeah, so just touching now on virtual asset service providers. Again, I would say that Cayman Islands has been a leader in this regard. I won't go into the legal definitions of what a VASP is, but essentially, it's exchanging, trading, transferring, managing, or safeguarding of crypto. Common VASP business types would be custodians, exchanges, OTC trading, exchanging crypto to fiat and providing wallets. If you're in any of that business, then yes, tick you're a VASP. An example of not a VASP would be like a gaming platform where you can earn and spend virtual currency, but only in the game like Roblox. All of our kids will actually know about, virtual assets in far more detail than some of us. Just in terms of VASPs as well, there are 357 unique VASPs globally and 19 in Cayman. Um, and in terms of the registration and licensing, it is important to be aware that if you're conducting VASP activities, regulators are on the lookout for non-authorized activities in the jurisdictions. So it is important that you license and register in the country of incorporation. You may need to license as well in the country where you have significant customers. And then your vast regulatory framework, for example, in Cayman right now, we're still under the registration regime. It's principally focused on AML and on travel rule. And then as the full licensing, in 19th of December 24, the VASP Amendment Act uh, was published to and expected to come into force in 2025. And when that's in force, you will have a far more wide-ranging regulatory framework, which includes, crypto asset listings. It will include consumer protection, custody, asset safekeeping, and other elements like that. And then national risk assessments. Obviously, if you were looking at engaging, you need to consider your national risk assessment medium high in this space. And then again, just on global arbitrage, again, there is a lot of going on right now, and in the EU, there's a lot of countries vying for the business, and some regimes are authorizing quicker than others. Once you're authorized, you can passport. The US is coming out strong now to open for business. Within the UAE, you have VARA, and you have different jurisdictions within the UAE who are competing for that business. And yeah, there's a lot going on. There's a lot going on in Cayman, Bahamas, Bermuda, BVI have approved as well. So yeah, so it's a busy space to be operating in right now, and I think even at government level, ministers are lobbying, and it's at the highest echelons. And now tokenized funds again, to mention tokenized fund, total value of tokenized assets is 118 billion. And Ethereum is the protocol that's dominating the market with 58% of tokenized assets, I believe. So tokenization converts real world assets into digital assets. So that's taking a physical or financial asset like gold, real estate, securities, and creating a digital representation of that. And that digital representation is your ownership of an asset in the real world. For example, masterpieces of art like a Van Gogh and a Dali could be held in a fund, and that fund can be tokenized, and you hold a piece of that art, and maybe even it sits in the Louvre, and you hold a tiny little piece of that because you're holding a token, a digital representation of your ownership in that. And real estate is being tokenized, so you can have fractional ownership of real estate. The benefits of tokenization, again, I mentioned wider market access and fractional ownership, democratization. It creates a whole new market for the financial services sector, or financial and asset management. And then just to touch briefly on programmability. So for the platforms, you have tokenized platforms that funds or asset managers will create these fund structures on. And within that, these smart contracts, they're the technology is very far advanced. It's gone beyond proof of concept. They're up and running, they're extremely robust, and you have standards. The way in TradFi we look to standards like SOC or ISO. And again, we may not know all of the underpinnings of those, but we know that they represent surety and standard and certified kind of control levels. In ERC 1404, that is smart contract standards. And that has things like there's standards, ERC 20 token standard, ERC 104, and what that allows is like whitelisting. It allows rules to be built. We've been speaking to tokenization platforms that have certain SEC rules for transacting built into the smart contracts. So it's like if A happens, then B executes. They're self-executing contracts that can put in, you can manage your lockup periods, you can manage your gateways through these smart contracts. It's basically coding the rules of an OM, an offering memorandum, into a code or a contract. And then, we're seeing a lot of movement in the bonds, exchange traded notes, mutual funds, and exchange traded funds. And then I think an important, in the funds world, a lot of headlines have been created by BlackRock, and Larry Fink, the chairman, said in 2024, we believe the next step going forward will be the tokenization of financial assets, and that means every stock, every bond will be on one ledger. And then in tokenization, what we're seeing as well is some formal regulatory standards being built. In the EU, there's a pilot regime that creates sandbox and a pilot program, and that creates, again, the certainty that we need and the kind of the guardrails of regulations to pilot test these. I'm conscious actually that I'm probably running out of time, but if we can move to the next slide.
No problem. So we got 15 minutes.
Apologies.
Yeah.
Apologies. So yeah, just here I've got a diagram that's showing the kind of the current ecosystem. If you look at the funds world, and then a tokenized future, and essentially with the tokenization, you will have all counterparties within the ecosystem feeding into the blockchain. Now, what that's going to do is we're going to see a changing landscape in terms of the share register, who owns it, the RTA activity, all settlement will be on chain. It removes duplication of efforts. It might make some roles redundant in the funds management ecosystem. And then you'll see new entrants like the tokenization platforms. You've got Securitize, Libre, Moneta Forge. You've got different ones in distribution platforms. And actually, interestingly, we're seeing distribution platforms that are well renowned and very established, like All Funds platform in the EU, now opening up their distribution network to this type of fund. And again, it is a journey. We're seeing some funds that are creating one share class that they will tokenize to try this. And one thing I would caveat is that really businesses shouldn't have the sense of FOMO, fear of missing out. They really need to prove the business case, because it does take a significant, uplift in terms of your operational business. As I mentioned, the atomic settlement, liquidity, all of these things. It takes a significant shift. So make sure you're not getting into it just for the FOMO, and that, there are proven cases, but we do have a lot of proven cases out there: BlackRock, Franklin Templeton, Hamilton Lane, and some of the big names that are out there. I was reading a report recently for predictions in 2025, and it read that Coinbase will enter the S&P 500 and MicroStrategy will enter the NASDAQ 100, adding crypto exposure to nearly every US investor's portfolio. So yeah, that's interesting. And even the Department of Labor in the US is expected to relax guidance against crypto in 401k plans, which is crazy. And sorry, folks, we have another poll question.
Yes.
Um,
One more poll question, Tom, if you can launch this one. It's has your organization anticipated the impact of tokenization? Um, okay, we won't sit on this one for too long, just for time. Let's see if we can get about
Yeah. So this is kind
50%.
of like, will it be a case of you'll research and build business cases or not do business there?
Mhm,
And then we'll see waves of activity and adoption. But as I said at the outset, regardless if you're engaging or not, I really would encourage firms to, if you're not, consider how it may impact you, not just today, but in 3 years' time, if you don't
mhm.
partake in that
And
sector.
it's not,
Okay.
and you're talking about the impact, not necessarily will we, take on these clients.
Yeah. Yeah.
How's it going to impact your business if you do or if you don't, kind of thing. It's
Yes.
just the
Yes.
impact of what's going on in the world. Um, okay, so you can go
Absolutely.
ahead and close that. We have 8% saying in depth, 39% of saying
Okay.
somewhat, and
That's actually higher than I would
53%.
have thought.
Yeah, it is actually, and 53% not at all. And for those who are kind of looking into it, I'm sure that's a lot of training, a lot of learning and research and mitigating, and getting advice from people like you and lawyers and insurance and things like that. So yeah, all right. Thank you for responding to that.
And I'm just going to briefly touch on banking and crypto because it's so funny. When I was originally saw that title, I was like, oh, I'm going to cite the AMA report because the AMA report the AMA report on debanking is exactly where we're at, which is that 75% of crypto funds and asset managers have difficulty opening or growing banking relationships. But since I had that thought, just in the US, the FDIC in the US approved banks engaging with crypto without any regulatory permission. So that is huge. That is absolutely massive. And I think actually that could lead to us seeing a merge between virtual asset service providers and mainstream banks. I think it would make sense because virtual asset service providers are having such issues in accessing banks. Like I've even heard some VASP saying, "I think we'll just acquire a bank; it'll be easier." And I think we may see that happen. We may see those dual services coming together. But in any case, the current landscape is it may be easier before long to access banking, but it has been extremely difficult. And even I'll use the example of us, provenance compliance or compliance advisory for digital assets. We are in the business of audit risk compliance for crypto, and we find it difficult to open because we have in our business plan crypto open bank accounts, to open or normal bank accounts, and all of these vast have normal fiat operational requirements, pay salaries, pay whatever. So they absolutely need it. So if you're opening, if countries are opening their business for VASP, you need to facilitate the baseline things that companies need to run. So yeah, and the rest of the world is a bit of wait and see in that regard. And I do think that some of it may be protectionism for the banking because they see obviously crypto as a significant threat to the way of doing business. So some of it is that, and yeah, and then the most recent kind of news this week is that like moving on from banking is government wider, and just yesterday Coinbase CEO said blockchain should be used for US Treasury, so you can see where your dollar goes. So if that happens, I'm paying my dollar or pay my tax, and I'm going to see on chain where it's being spent. Now that's like another level altogether. But it could bring in some interesting fraud-proof voting, which would be incredible. Um, and then, okay, we're going to move on to DAOs. So DAOs are DAO stands for a decentralized autonomous organization. And if you think of it as a community that's enabled by Internet Web3, it's autonomous, dynamic, powerful, coming together for a common purpose. It's a community, kind of like with a town council, let's say just a town council whose goal is to maintain the town standards and operation by enforcing codes of the community. Trust can be delegated and retracted. Now, DAOs traditionally are they it's not like a company. There's no board of director. Oh, sorry, on a foundation there is, but the DAO is this self-serving community that is organized by its members. There are governance tokens where you vote for the outcome of something. However, in order to operate with the rest of the world, a DAO needs some kind of a legal wrapper, because again, how do you contract with third parties? How do you open a bank account? What happens for tax? What happens for any liability purposes? So we do see that the company is not running the DAO. The DAO will set up a foundation, or it will set up underlying companies, but the companies don't sit on top of the DAO. The DAO kind of runs the companies. And then, yeah, so in terms of governance, governance tokens allocate voting rights, and they're the rights and permissions set out in the underlying governance protocols and against smart contracts. And then you're generally allocated tokens for governance based on participation and your level of contribution. So if I'm really active in the community, in the DAO, and I'm doing a lot of work in the community, then I will be allocated certain governance tokens to vote and such. And then the ecosystem, you might have a special council within the DAO that are made up of significant token holders, and they may, you may need to hire somebody to do your accounting, let's say, or your treasury management. So an RFP is put together, it goes out to the ecosystem, you get different applications in, there's presentations. The special counsel may give their opinion on the proposals that are put in, and then the community vote, and then somebody is hired to do the work for the treasury. And then you may come across the term TVL, and that is total value locked. And that's total digital assets that are committed to a specific DeFi protocol. And for example, Avara has 22 billion in total value locked. So now if we can just look at the challenges for compliance on DAOs. Again, I can probably quickly go through these because I've touched on most of them, but again, legal existence. There have been, many cases where there have been failings because there's no legally binding structure with no UBOs. And back to your point, your earlier point, Kim, in terms of onboarding a DAO. So what we're seeing actually in Cayman, again, referring to Cayman, a very common setup right now in Cayman, in and through Cayman, is setting up a foundation over the DAO, and then you'll have a lab company or a token issuance company in the BVI. So you have activity in the BVI, and then you have that control structure in Cayman. And to onboard the foundation, you will have directors, you will have a secretary, you may have signatories on wallets, you may have director, secretary, company secretary. You can inquire about a special counsel and multi-sigs. And you can do your KYC due diligence on those. The underlying activities of the DAO themselves are not regulated, but we are seeing a lot of DAOs self-regulate and say, we're issuing tokens. We want to make sure that we are not issuing to anybody who is, well, and in any case, everybody's, needs to be ensuring there's no activity with sanctions. They are doing KYC on token recipients and wallet screenings and such. One of the issues for DAOs in itself, less for compliance, is the certainty, loyalty. Users can lose interest and then pull capital out of the DAO, and there's no certainty in that unless you kind of build in lockups and things like that. Decision making can be slow and inefficient in the early stages. And then voter behavior. Again, you talk to a DAO specialist, and this I think is also fascinating, but there can be, and some of the DAOs that I've seen, I'm like, oh, this actually works more like an organization than I thought, because there can be a concentration of power among a few significant token holders. And then in other cases, there can be complete apathy or low participation, sometimes because of the complexity of issues. And then security, there have been some major failings that, you research those, Mt. Gox, Quadriga, sudden death of people, and their keys have become inaccessible, and the control frameworks around that. There's been collusion and vote buying within DAOs. And then opportunities, aside from onboarding DAOs formed as foundations, unless you're a DAO specific service provider, you may not have much interaction with them because they're not regulated in of themselves. But in terms of opportunities, there are many to set up as, to support the ecosystem of a company that is not a company. And I know that probably sounds confusing. I'm happy to answer questions on it. So that is it pretty much on challenges for DAOs. And then, folks, I finally wanted to touch on just some key takeaways. If you take anything away for you today, if a lot of it is just not resonating with you or not identifying with things, I would say as practical steps, road mapping your company's engagement or intersection with digital assets. Establish from your company, from the board level, what is the appetite for doing business with digital assets, with VAST, with tokenized funds, with crypto funds, etc. If not at all, that's totally fine, but encourage a study of where it may intersect or otherwise affect your business in the future. And again, I think I've said that a few times. Perhaps survey your clients to understand their position, your key clients. Is that in their horizon or not? Um, then if you do engage with digital assets in the future, make sure you update your business risk assessment for the level of engagement and participation that you envisage. Or indeed, if you're choosing not to, then you may want to put it under competition risk. We're not going to engage, therefore we may, lose out on this. Updating PMPs and control framework. There are certain obviously specific elements. Again, you don't need to understand all the underlying technology, but there are certain frameworks that are specific, like travel rule, on-chain analytics, crypto asset listing, segregation of assets, red flags for virtual assets, mixers, tumblers, privacy coins. All of those things are nuanced too, so you want to uplift your PMPs to bring those under your framework. And then hiring, training, and then communicate, collaborate, 10x. 10x collaborate, bring in all kinds of people. We do it all of the time because nobody has all of the answers. There's lots of moving parts and pieces. And then invest in systems, on-chain analytics, eKYC, either invest in them or outsource your engagement, that part of your business to somebody who does it until you are comfortable with doing it. And then update client collateral. That's an easy one. Add on to your DDQs when you're onboarding a client. Do you invest in in crypto? Is it ERC20? There's a number of key questions you can ask and help you understand the specific risk profile of somebody doing business in the space. And then your checklists. And then as well, another important consideration is insurance, making sure that your business insurance covers doing business in the space. And
Great.
I think that,
I'm actually going to leave this one up for a little while. The next slide is some useful resources for those who have been asking. Yes, you will get copies of the slides. Um, but yeah, because we're down to the hour now. We did have some questions. The one that I am going to ask, because I know this is a very important question. Unfortunately, we're not going to be able to answer the others. But it's like, what KYC do you get? That is the big question that people want when they are dealing with a DAO. And I'll use the DAOs as an example, because you had mentioned people will set up like a Cayman Foundation, and obviously you can do KYC traditionally like you would a regular foundation. And then you mentioned that they have a lab company that is set up in BVI. Did I understand that correct? So that'd be like just another company that they own, that foundation owns?
yeah. So you have a company. So when it comes to KYC, right, as in we can't go to beneficial owners. So we go to direction or control. Directors are controlled. So you can obviously KYC the directors with the foundation. You KYC the secretary, multi signatories, if you can point to them. I think special counsel as well. I would ask. That's a new question, right? Special counsel are people with special voting rights or who are senior, and they're often kind of the individuals who are founding members. And what I would say that becomes different when you look at the labs company, you want to ask for things like a white paper. So you want to look at what is the objective of this DAO, what is their founding principles, because between all of the legitimate business concepts and organizations, there's obviously a lot of fluff and there's a lot of scams. So you want to see how legitimate are these and who are the principles behind it, like who is driving this. And that can be found in public forums, right? A lot of this information is not going to be in your usual certified copies. It's more of a deep dive online in the Web3 forums, in the Web3 space, to understand the legitimacy of the principles behind it. What is their profile? So again, it's a move, Kim, it's a move of mindset or a shift of mindset in how we do KYC. It's not ticking boxes of collecting certain pieces of paper. it's deeper than that. It's more forensic analysis, more OSINT, and and demonstrating that you're doing everything to understand, well, whose idea was this?
Hmm.
Who's putting assets into this? Who's putting money on the line here? Um, and, and that's how you can do it. So the token issuance, the operations, the company that is building the community in a way is going through the BVI, and the foundation is what you're going to engage with in Cayman, and that, like, that's your normal verification checklist of documentation.
Yeah, yeah. And for those who aren't familiar with that white paper, you can Google, or search for just Google DAO white paper, and you'll probably get some examples.
Yeah.
And do you have any that you can name, Cara? Any kind of uh,
I can share one or two following this. I'll just like look through what would be a good example to send that would have some of the the key concepts. But like any, let's just say you want to look at MakerDAO or Aave Avara, or again, yeah, you can. This is the great thing. So much of it is publicly available.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, I had Googled a few this morning, and was kind of reviewing them. I was like, okay, this is kind of it starts to make sense when you start reading the documentation and understanding the wallets. Those of you who asked about wallets, we do have a webinar that we did, and that was the one with Andy Carpenter in July of 2023. He discussed wallets and stuff like that. I'll talk to Tom, see if there's a way we can share that, or
And
point you in the right
actually,
direction. Sorry.
on the topic of wallets, Kim, I think one of the best trainings you can do is to open your own wallet, like open a MetaMask wallet
Yes,
or open
absolutely,
Coinbase
absolutely.
wallet. When
Yeah,
you hold it yourself,
then
you
you
better present.
understand it. Yeah, and it's interesting. Yeah, that because when I first heard about cryptocurrency, and I think it was 2014, 2013 or 14, I can't remember what year it was, or 15. And of course, I kick myself now because that was back when it was like $500 a coin. But that was just too much in my mind. Now it's
Yeah,
almost
yeah.
100 grand. But yeah, it's playing with it yourself, and as you say, opening a wallet and understanding it. That's when you really start to learn it. So I definitely recommend that. All right, Cara, thank you so much. So, and again, these practical steps that you will have to take. Again, updating policies and procedures, updating your business risk assessment, getting your board, to understand and sign off. Hiring and training. I mean, you're going to have to train your current staff. I mean, that's work. That's a heavy uplift, really. But and you got to plan it out. It's not going to be tomorrow. You can't go, okay, yeah, we're going to take this phone on. We're going to do it. You've got to. It's going to have all these impacts on those systems that you talk about. And again, and you have to think too in terms of, we talk about checklists. Back in my day, it was like you sent a questionnaire, they filled it out, they scanned it, signed it, brought it back. Of course, everybody wants everything done online these days and instantaneous. Um, so you're absolutely right. You do have to invest in these systems that kind of bring everything into kind of more
Yeah, and you know what's
automation.
interesting as well, Kim, is throw it out there in your organization, because there's often people in organizations who have a deep understanding and interest
Hmm.
who you may not be aware of, and oftentimes I'll be frank, and yes, I am generalizing, but often it's the younger, people in an organization that may have a very deep understanding, and you may even have like somebody who's within your organization who can provide some training. This is how you open a wallet, and whatever.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So great. So yeah, so we're just about 5 minutes over. Useful resources. This will be on the slide. Um, and Cara, you guys provide services like including some training, bespoke training. So if you do have somebody who is kind of like we're a bit lost, and I would assume that you kind of like would help a board as well, kind of understand like the
Yeah.
impact. Do you do anything like that? You said.
Yeah, we,
Uh,
we do board training as well, and I apologize. There was not a lot. I wish there was more time for questions. As in, so if anybody wants to email me, or LinkedIn is generally where I am. If you want to LinkedIn message me any questions, again, I go back to collaboration. More than happy to share any information or specific questions you may have, any of your audience may have.
Great. Thank you, Kara. I appreciate that. I'm sure everybody will. And again, so slides and recording will go out in a couple of days, I would assume. Upcoming topics for us, just a reminder, Cayman, the Proceeds of Crime Act revisions. and the SARS kind of how that's going to change SARS. That's Tuesday. Again, this is a very last minute one. We will be sending that out. So if you are in Cayman or you're a Cayman fund director or something like that, you need to kind of, our fund administrator, please, this is a very important topic. Please do join us. Country risk rating, always a hot topic as well. People are trying to figure that one out. FATCA and CRS, and engaging the board with these AML reports. So kind of ties back into what we were just discussing too. Um, so yes, please do keep an eye out for those as well. And then, of course, for those who do need that kind of AML awareness training, we're announcing one. It'll be in May, and so there's more information about this training that I'll be providing as well. Thank you, Kara. I do appreciate you so much. You reached out and you said, you understood this topic, and I was so grateful because this has been something that has been asked for so many people, and I know it's so much. We could just go into DAOs, we could just go into tokenized funds, in just individual webinars, and I'm sure at some point we will, as everything kind of, I want to say settles. Do you think it's ever going to settle? All the movement going on in digital asset and the DeFi
Yeah,
world.
yes, I actually do. Yeah, I think in 3 years' time we'll be looking back and going, why did we find that so difficult?
Exactly. um, and
It
let me
already
ask
feels like
you, yeah,
it
and
feels, yeah.
yeah, if you don't mind my asking, do you think, um, I want to say, do you think cryptocurrencies and stuff is going to kind of outpace fiat currency in transactions in the next 3 years?
Well, I would have said no, and then I'm just, looking at the Mastercard, Visa versus stablecoin. I'm just like, what?
Hmm.
So no, I cannot answer that. I don't know.
I'm
Um,
leaning towards. I think it will. I
mm.
think
Well,
it's.
I think like if I think about even my own children, right? They're 12 and 9.
Hmm.
Um, by the time they're 15, if I gave them a $20 bill, they'd be like, "What's that, mom? Like, put it in my digital wallet." What is that?
Exactly. Yes, exactly.
Um,
Yeah, there's just so much going on, and I also saw. I mean, and we didn't even cover the topic of centralized bank digital currency (CBDCs), which the
yeah,
U.S. Trump has just said, nope, no can do. There is you can Google the stuff. I found a great. It was just a short 5-minute podcast. It was with an author who wrote a book, and it went. It was the book was titled Digital Currency or Digital Control. And he was
yeah,
kind of saying this is a way for governments to control you.
yeah.
They can shut you down, things like that. So if it's so it's kind of interesting because I was like, you'd heard a couple of years ago how, yep, these countries, I think it's El Salvador, their
Yeah,
currency is, yep,
yeah, yeah,
all digital.
yeah.
Um, yeah, so you
To be
kind of think,
honest,
okay, yeah,
Kim, I don't think the US need it. What they want is the stable coin, right? Because look at the dominance of the US dollar through back stable
yeah.
coins. That's where they're doubling down.
Okay, yeah, yeah. I just kind of, like I said, you need a little bit of research, and you kind of find this stuff out. It's a very fascinating topic, and again, it's one of the reasons why I love compliance and AML is simply because it's you never get bored. You're always
Not
learning.
a chance.
And,
Not a
yeah, and
chance.
this is a fantastic time to be in this industry. It's some people would say, oh, it's like the wild wild west. Um,
No, it's not. It's not.
it's
Mm-mm.
not. I think it's just I think it's just the technology aspect that kind of scares some of the people or they don't understand it. But exactly as you mentioned before, we don't understand how Swift
You
works.
don't have to. You don't
But we
have
don't
to
have.
understand all of the underpinnings. That is the key to moving forward in this space in compliance. Your core
Mhm.
tenets, your corporate governance, they're all the same. The underpinning technology is different, but the rules of the road are still the same.
Yeah. And again, when it comes to those, the KYC aspects, it's get those corporate documents, read through them, find out who's got the voting rights.
Yeah,
Same foundation. Who's the controlling parties, whether it's the
yeah,
directors. Yeah, and then where those funds are coming from. I mean, yeah, it's gonna be a little bit of a learning curve, but as as you say, people like yourself are available. They now know your name. They can reach out to you on LinkedIn. Here's your email, and get these questions. So, Cara, thank you so much.
Thank
Again,
you.
I
It's an
know
absolute pleasure.
absolute pleasure to have you. And Tom, thank you as well for all your help with launching polls and everything, and as well to the audience. Thank you. You guys are always fantastic. You always ask such great questions. Um, and Kara, I will send you some of the questions that have been asked that we didn't get to, so maybe we could put something together. But as one person says, never enough time, but always, it's great discussions just to kind of learn about this stuff, so and become aware. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful rest of your day.